All right, everybody, welcome back. Bio Bros, episode 6 on all platforms. Reminder there's 14 YouTube exclusives on YouTube before this one. So, today we are going to be talking about how we decide what the next pet we're going to get is. We have a few different kind of ways we go about determining if we should even get one, and then how we go about finding that perfect species for us to keep. Um, I'll get us started on the very first thing I do is it a good idea for me to get an animal? Do I have the space? Do I have the money? And do I have the time? Are my top three things for getting any animal right out the gate. If any of those are answered no, not time to get a new pet. If they all check out, all right, now let's look into what I want, what I think is a good idea for me. Okay, so we will get into next step. All right. After I said, all right, I would like a pet. Now we kind of get to have a little more freedom. I first go with space. If there's not enough space to have a huge tank, all right, then cuts it down, right? We get a little tank, narrows it down a bit. I can have fish, small reptiles, small amphibians. If I want a fish, all right, let's see. I can fit probably a 20-gallon tank. What fish fit in a 20-gallon tank? Fresh, salt. What do I like more? And then I look into those, go down that rabbit hole like a choose your own adventure story a little bit and be like, okay, I want saltwater fish. All right, I'm gonna do some more research in here and here. I found out saltwater fish in smaller tanks, they're hard to keep. And I don't think I want to commit to that level. So then I'm like, all right, I still want fish. We'll go down the freshwater rabbit hole. And then I start looking at different things here and there, maybe things I thought or doing more and more and more research on individuals from that one. Um, Alex, I'm sure you do about the same thing.
Yeah, I start a little differently. Just basically the way I'll start is I'll start the same with like, can I or do I want? Should I have a pet right now? Should I add another one? And then instead of going to size, like enclosure I can do, I'll go to what species I would want to keep. And the reason I do that instead of size is because if I've determined I want a pet or like another pet, I normally will have a species in mind. And so instead of just going, oh, well, I can fit this size tank, let me get something that can fit into that, I would rather get something that I know I'm going to be interested in and have more passion for and things like that. And be like, okay, so say I want a bearded dragon. Can I fit a 4x2x2 tank in my room or in wherever? My house, apartment, wherever.
Yeah, of course, if I have a species in mind that I like, I'm like, okay, I really like these. How do I make it happen? Like that's how I am with rattlesnakes. Like
Yeah.
I want a rattlesnake. It's just how do I make it happen? And right now that doesn't work. But if I don't know what I want, I just kind of am like, all right, I think I want another snake. I want a snake of some kind. I don't really know yet. There's a ton of cool ones. Then I kind of go to like, all right, how much space do I have? Okay, I have this much space to work with. Now let's figure out what I can fit in that area.
Yeah, I think that's definitely when people, especially when like you people or you guys, the viewers or the listeners, not viewers yet. But when you're looking at it, it's more of, especially if you don't have very many animals or it's like one of your first animals, going into that is the best way to do it. Be like, hey, what can I fit reasonably in my room or my house or whatever. But when you get up to like where you and I are, Shaw, where we have a whole bunch of species or things like that, then it's more of, do I think like you more get into I want this instead of what do I have room for? What can I get?
Yeah, it's like as you get more and more and you do a bunch of research on a ton of different animals, you're like, I want one of these. Can I make it happen? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Can't get that. Or yes. All right, let's get it going. Like for me, right now, I'll go through a process I kind of recently gone through. I'm still going through actually. I want a snake. I lost my snake of 10 years recently, a few months ago, and miss having that guy around. Like, I like snakes. I want one. And thinking of times past and all that. And I also, end goal with snakes is I want to keep venomous stuff. I want to have a rattlesnake. And so I'm like, okay, I want a snake that is pretty close to a rattlesnake, but not venomous. So that way I can practice venomous handling techniques without the risk. And so I'm like, okay, I want something like that. I have two empty 36 by 18 tanks. All right, I got that. Now, one of them is already set up tropical and one of them is already set up arid. That's not a problem for me now, which is nice. And if you have a blank slate, of course, tropical, arid, desert, doesn't matter, whatever. You can make that happen. And so I'm like, okay, what do I want? So I start doing just a ton of research on snakes. Just start looking up, going through. So it's something that I do is I'll go through like online places that sell animals, and I'll just look through what do they have. And if I think something's cool, I'll look into it a little more. And then I was like, okay, I think I've settled on something. I found something cool. A viper boa or Candoya aspera, which is funny. They call them viper boas. They don't even mimic vipers. They mimic Papua New Guinea death adders, which are not vipers. They are elapids that just fit the same ecological niche as a lot of terrestrial vipers do. And these are awesome because they're small. They can fit comfortably in my tank. They're very slow metabolism, so I don't have to take a ton of direct care every single day into it. It's not an animal that's going to overwhelm you because it needs so much attention. And as the name suggests, viper boa, they act like vipers, and a rattlesnake is a viper. So I'm like, all right, I think this is the snake I want, and been doing more and more and more research, and I think that's the one for me. But along the way, other stuff came up too, like hognose snakes. Not just the traditional Western, the tricolors, the Easterns, South Americans, all the different hognose snakes came through as well. And I was thinking about those, being like, okay, maybe one of these, maybe one of those. And I just kind of, over all of this research I did into those individual species, I think Viper boa is the fit for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of doing your research, figuring out what would fit you, your personality, your the time you have available to work with that animal, the resources you have, including the money you have to be able to spend on enclosures, lighting, setups, food, all that kinds of stuff. Um, like recently, I was telling Shaw that I have started setting up a budget or a new budget, and it really once you actually start like planning all this out and stuff, you go, "Wow, I spend a lot more on animals than you would think," and that's something you have to account for, um, because you are gonna have if it's a reptile you're getting, more than likely you're gonna have it for a long time, and it's gonna cost a lot if it's an expensive feeder. Like I know rodents right now are some of them are over a dollar or two a piece or more, even if you buy them in bulk. Um, so you got to think about that. Can I afford to feed this animal? Can I afford to replace its lighting when they burn out, or buy all these types of lighting to start with? Because some animals need heat and UVB, and you also have to have the light to show a daytime nighttime cycle so their circadian rhythms going. You just have to be self-aware of that and plan that as well when you're choosing your next animal.
Yeah. I think of it kind of like a choose your own adventure story. They're like, oh, if you get to a point and it's like flip to page 28 if you chose to take the path on the left, flip to page 18 if you went to the path on the right, and then it kind of determines, then you hit a dead end and it says go back to page 12 and then restart the adventure. That's kind of how I think about it, where I start the very first things. Okay, I have space, I have time, I have money, I can have a pet. That's what I want. And then I'm like, I want a reptile. Okay, maybe the reptile I want is a fish. Is not a fish. Sorry, the reptile I want is a lizard. I want a lizard. All right, now we're onto the lizard path. Now I'm gonna start looking at different lizards, going to pet stores, just looking at what they have, seeing what's interesting there, what's cool. Looking at online places, just watching YouTube videos about the best pet lizards, all that stuff. Looking here and there. All right, that's cool. Oh, that's neat. Okay, now I'm thinking geckos. I like geckos. Those are cool. All right, now I'm looking at all these geckos. Day geckos, I don't know about the lighting and stuff requirements. They're small. You can't really hold them. It's not really fun for me. All right, I'm gonna look over here. Oh, crested geckos. Those are cool. Those seem to be super popular. And then you get into that, and you're like, they don't necessarily need UV light. Their tanks aren't huge. There's not a live food requirement. All right, that's shaping up. I think crested gecko is a good pet. So then now you're looking at crested geckos, and now that might be the one you settle on. Or and then you go back and you're like, you know what? Actually, I think I want day geckos. I like how diverse day geckos are. I'm gonna go back and look at those, and then that's what you want. And it's just a long, kind of annoying process, but you if you take the time to do it, you always pay off. It always pays off. You always get the good ending to your story because you get to truly pick what's right for you.
Yeah, and you don't when it comes to reptiles or even inverts, fish, all that kind of stuff, you don't want to get end up with something that you didn't fully want. As in, like, you don't want to get some because, oh, that looked cool, and then not do as much research into it. And then once you get it, you're like, oh, I can't hold it. Or, oh, this is a lot more work than I was thinking. Or, um, it's also if it's not something you're truly passionate about or like in like, oh, I love this species, there's the chance that when that animal's 14 years, 15 years old, you're like, okay, why do I still have this?
Yeah, or you get in over your head, like chameleons. Chameleons are so much harder to care for than people realize. They need constant attention. Things need to be going right for them all the time. They are
Oh
not
yeah.
very good in captivity. Like they're really good at dying, and, and it's a disaster.
Yeah, certain species of chameleon we can't even as a hobbyist properly keep in the way they're supposed to be like Jackson's chameleons because like they like temp drops down to the 50s some nights and they have to have that or they will get stressed because in the wild they are having them those temperature drops where they are dropping down to the low 60s high 50s for nights upon at a time. But if you can't replicate that in captivity, which unless you have a commercial grade AC unit or have them living inside of a wine cooler, which you cannot do, it's not possible.
Yeah, it's they're very hard. You need a full you need a very fancy setup for all that. And then you get
Yeah.
into it, and then you're in way over your head. Now the animal suffers for it. Not ideal. Who doesn't love chameleons? Like chameleons are awesome. Everybody knows what they are. They're great. Everybody wants one. But without doing a ton of research into it, you don't necessarily realize how difficult they truly are. But then other animals too are like similar. You know, they fill a similar role and are way more manageable. And then you have to think about your life too. Like if I was to get a pet lizard, we'll stay on that theme, for the very first one for a younger kid, say maybe 7 years old, getting into reptiles, want something. I think I would end up going with a blue tongue skink, assuming that we had the space for that. Just because they're so tough. They're very forgiving. They don't bite. They make it very obvious if they are angry because of the blue tongue. And I just think that's a really good one. Even though I think overall the crested gecko is the best pet lizard, in my opinion. I think for a younger kid, blue tongues are the best. They're way more personable. They're totally cool with handling. They tolerate it so well. And crested geckos just aren't quite there. Like they they'll get a little stressed. They don't necessarily want to be held all the time. They need the humidity more. So they have to go back to their tank. I think Like, I would go for blue tongue. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and I mean blue tongues versus cresteds, I would also go blue tongue because they're basically a mini tank.
Yeah,
They they're very durable, especially for a little kid, because little kids they'll grab and they will drop and things like that. And a crested, you grab it, it drops its tail. You'll never see it grow a tail back again because they don't. Or if they get dropped, they could get hurt. A blue tongue, obviously, I'm not saying let your kid just go drop the lizard, but
yeah,
if it's a blue tongue and the kid accidentally drops it, he's gonna be okay.
yeah. I would
It's if the kid
much
grabs
more
it,
likely
he's
say
not gonna
fish.
drop a tail. Yeah, they'll and they're also bigger and easier for little kids to hold.
Yeah. But on the opposite end of that, if it was one of my friends who's older or somebody potentially shopping for like a teenage son, or maybe not son, that was a sneak into my personal life. I've been helping people out with reptiles. Their older kid, I would recommend the crested gecko because they're a little more mature. Their chances are a lot higher that they'll be more understanding of the animal's behaviors and they're not going to absolutely need to hold the thing for 2 hours a day. I would go with the crested gecko because they take up a little less space. They're a little less demanding in your home, especially if you don't know that you're into reptiles yet. You're just like, I don't know if I want these all over my home. I would recommend that one. So that's where I go back to like choose your own adventure story thing, where it's who are you? What do you value? Okay, I don't care about holding like personally, I don't care about holding my animals. I really don't. I understand that reptiles don't have the same like community and like friends and stuff that we do as humans. Doesn't mean they're not intelligent, it just means they have a different set of emotions than we do. I understand they don't care about being held. So for me, I don't really care. Holding a reptile doesn't matter to me. It can be really nasty and mean. And I'm like, okay, man, I'll hold you as little as I have to because you obviously don't like it. But I don't need to hold them all the time. So that's not a problem for me. Other people, they want a pet. They want something they can interact with. And it's a common thing I hear. I tell people like I want like rattlesnakes. They're like, but you can't even hold them. I'm like, okay. And you
Yeah.
can't hold fish either.
Yeah, that's how I am with the Madagascar giant day gecko. I'll tell people about 'em, like, "Yeah, they're gorgeous and everything. You'll never be able to hold them because 'cause they're grease lightning when they need to be, and if you grab them, they will shed their skin, and not in a good way." Um, so they but it's the fact of watching them in their enclosure, and you can still interact with them because like, it's different too. Because I was telling one of my buddies because they're getting one of the babies, um, they came to see the parents, and, like, it's different for some species, like day geckos and things like that, because, yes, you can't hold them, but every time I walk past that tank, or anytime anyone walks past that tank, they're watching you. They get excited when they see me coming with a cup of food because they recognize it. They know what's happening, and you're still interacting with the animal. They're watching, they're learning, they know. And it's really cool to have that interaction and like, watch those behaviors and stuff. And I don't have to hold them.
Yeah. It's like that might be something you value. You know, you value watching those behaviors rather than experiencing it, I guess. Like you don't have to hold them to see all
Yeah.
that cool stuff going down. It's like with fish. Uh, Fish are like that. I love my little puffer fish. I have a Valentini puffer in my reef tank. He's great. That's my little buddy. We come over, he's swimming around, he's waiting for food. He's awesome. Check out our TikTok. There's a video of me feeding him on there. He's great. Awesome fish. And I don't have to hold him, and that's just kind of the expectation, you know? Like, he can still be my friend, even if he doesn't know it. I'm not his friend. He likes me because I feed him. He doesn't
Yeah.
care about me personally. But that's still super cool. And it's really, really hard to beat a nice fish tank for aesthetics. There's a reason they're in every doctor's and dentist office, right? People are stressed out in there. They want to look at this nice fish tank. And
Yeah.
if that's something you value, right? If this is going to be in your living room, you want it to make sure it looks nice. All right. first order of business, tank is going in my living room. Second order of business, it has to look nice. All right, what looks nice? Well, things that look nice, fish tanks look awesome, and dart frog vivariums tend to look awesome. So now it's
Yes.
like, okay, do you want frogs or fish? Let's see. Well, I don't really. I like poison dart frogs. They have a cool name. They're a good conversation piece. Every time people are like, "Well, what's in there?" And you're like, "Oh, poison dart frogs." And you're like, "What? Aren't those going to kill you?" And then you get to explain that no, they're not actually poisoned in captivity, but they're still really cool and they have awesome colors. That's cool. I like doing that when I kept them. That was something I enjoyed doing. And
Hmm.
some of the species are pretty bold, but some of the species are pretty shy. So then that's back to your choose your own adventure. What do you value more? Like, do you want one that might not necessarily be the prettiest in the world, but is out all the time? Or do you want one that's just a little gem you're searching for in the tank?
Yeah, I mean, it's just again choosing your own adventures, doing your research, and especially research. That's a big one. You have to do your research because, especially if you're like first getting into the hobby or something like that, because we named two that were very good starters. I think so. Um, Blue tongues would be the only knock against them. Really, is that they have to have a interesting diet, I guess, because they eat everything essentially. Um, but those are two really good ones. But another one, like it's changing all the time too. Because when Shaw and I first got into the hobby, leopard geckos were like, oh, everyone's like, oh, they're the great starter. They only need to be in a 10-gallon their whole life. Blah blah blah. All this stuff. Well, we've come to realize, really, most leopard geckos should be kept in a 40 breeder, and that's very different footprint than a 10-gallon. And it changes over time. I mean, the hobby is constantly changing, so starter reptiles are constantly changing as we learn more and more information about these animals and realize better ways to take care of them. So do your research. Always do your research before even considering an animal. Make sure that it is right for you and you have the ability to care for it for the entirety of its life.
Yeah, it's another big one too. Like this animal might be perfect for you, except you don't really know where you're gonna be in 10 years, let's say, right?
Mhm.
You're like, I might move away, things might change. Maybe don't get one, maybe don't get tortoises, right? Right now you have a nice yard and live in a favorable climate where you can keep a tortoise. But if you're not fairly settled, probably not a good idea to get something that's gonna live 100 years.
Yeah.
So, because that's like here, it happens to people all the time because our climate is really good for sulcata tortoises. People get them and then they move. And where they move doesn't have a yard anymore. And now they have this giant tortoise with nowhere to go. And then you have tortoise rescues here that are just overfull constantly because people didn't fully think it through. Like it was good in the moment, but it was not good in the long term. And that's just how it goes. And you can avoid that a bit. Just really look into everything. Like I said, start off with, is it a good idea to even get any pet, anything at all? And then go into, all right, how much space do I have? How much extra money do I have like per month? Because they eat every single week or more often. Some things a little less often, but they still eat. You have to pay for food. You have to pay for lights a lot of times. And you have to pay for power to those tanks, right? An aquarium will have a filter and a light and a heater at bare minimum. Do you have enough money for the extra of that? And water too. Some people get have to pay for, well, water can be expensive depending on where you live. You have a 100-gallon fish tank, say you're like that's a bit.
Hmm.
And check off all those. All right, it's a good decision. Now what do I want? Broadly, what do I want? Do I want fish? Do I want reptiles? Do I want bugs? Do I want birds, mammals? All right, I want one of those broadly. Okay, now what's more specific? All right, I need a small snake. I don't have a ton of space, but I like snakes. All right, now you can look into more specific species. Now start looking into those and then truly find that one that stands out to you for real.
Yeah, it's research, research, research. I mean, we can't say it enough.
Yeah, it's literally just start Googling around. Like, just Google snakes for sale. Like, I'll do it right now. We will see. And we're gonna get past the sponsored ones, and then just click on, you know, first links that are on there, and then it has tons of different categories. You know, boas, blood pythons, ball pythons, carpet pythons, king snakes, milk snakes, rat snakes, all that stuff. And then you just start scrolling, and you'd be like, oh, that snake looks cool. Let's look into that. And then you look into those more and more and more. Then you can look into all the other stuff too. You be like, oh, what's this? Amphibians. Let's look into the amphibian section. Maybe a frog would be cool. And you look, and you're like, oh, I could have a Pac-Man frog. Pac-Man frogs, those things are hilarious. So that's definitely why I do it. I just start Googling, get on Google, get on YouTube, start watching videos. Find a YouTuber too that just has a lot of animals that are in that genre, and just watch all of their videos. You'll catch something in the background, you'll see something they have, and you'll be like, "That's sweet. What is that? I need to learn about it."
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's how I got into tarantulas and other inverts because YouTube, I've just seen a bunch of people keeping them, and they were I learned about it, listened to care things for different ones that I thought looked cool and things like that, ones I might want to keep, and I was like, these are really cool, and I think I'm gonna get some species. I went with some of the ones that I knew were good species to start with, and that's how I got into it. Now I have uh 16 arachnids. So,
I mean, it's how it gets us all fun. But another thing I will say too is I don't believe in beginner or advanced animals. I don't. I believe in care levels. I believe there's low care levels and like high care levels, and some animals are more forgiving than others. If there's a species that you are dead set on keeping, if you're like, I absolutely love these, you can make it happen. Just make sure you're committed to that. Just understand that it might be hard, and
that you
you
will
just
need to do
yeah,
more research than you have done even for college classes on that specific animal and their care.
yeah. It's you might have to do a lot into it. And that is hard. Like with experience, if you have experience keeping corn snakes and ball pythons, you kind of know a bit about snakes before you get into the higher level stuff, like what more people consider like advanced snakes, like green tree pythons or like boega and stuff like that. People will be like, "Oh, those are advanced." It's like, well, maybe, but if you're really willing to put in that work, you can do it. Yeah, they might be tricky to feed, but you can do it. It doesn't. You don't have to keep. There's not prerequisites. You know, it isn't college classes where you have to take this class before you're allowed to take that class. You don't have to keep a ball python before you keep a viper boa. You don't have to do that. You can go straight into it. But understand that there's going to be some work. So don't be discouraged though. Just because you want an animal and they say it's advanced only, take it with a grain of salt. Like understand that it's probably going to be hard and probably not the best starting spot, but you can do it. You can do it for sure. Other than that, just do the same choose your own adventure story that we started this whole thing out with. Go down one rabbit hole, and if you hit a home run, hole in one, sorry, hit a hole in one, great, awesome, cool. But chances are you're not. You're gonna do pretty bad in this golf round here. But look through and you'll find something. You will find one that fits. There are so many species of animals out there. I mean, this website that I looked up for the like that example I showed, Has 29 pages of amphibians on it. One will fit your needs eventually if you want to keep an amphibian of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, a great resource, and I'm just gonna give it a shout out just because they are a great resource in my mind, for finding reptiles, amphibians, even some, not as much for inverts, but still inverts are good too. Is Morph Market. Look on Morph Market. They they make people label things if they're wild caught and stuff like that. There is thousands upon thousands of different animals on there, species. There's all kinds of stuff, and they're always changing it to add more. So that is a great resource just to look and see what you might be interested in, and then go and do research on that specific species.
Yeah, that's a good one. I always forget to look at them, but I'll give a shout out to you. If you made it this far in the show, you can hear my shout outs. Usually we try not to shout people out just because try not to be fully like associated people. Sometimes I don't want to ever make it seem like we're taking a side in anything. But Clint's Reptiles on YouTube. Clint is very good source for beginners, advanced, all sorts of it. I watch his videos all the time about care for animals. He does a good job. Um, big fan of him.
Yeah, he is. I love his videos.
Yeah, seems like a good guy too. Like I think he has good intentions with all of his videos. He's not trying to sell animals, which I appreciate. I don't like taking care advice from people who are selling the animal because they're incentivized to tell me it's super easy. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, so this episode a little shorter, but it's really not all that complex. Nice bit of a week off almost from the higher level episodes that we've had recently. And that will be Bio Bros episode 6 for you guys. Remember, like, follow, subscribe, share, favorite, good buttons. If it's good, hit it. Just go down there, go nuts. If you made it this far, leave a comment. I want to know who's hit. I want to know who's here. Join the Discords, follow the Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. Do all of that as well. That's the best spot to reach us. Well, hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next week.
you guys.